Make it plain.
MIP.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, our conversation today here on Make It Plain is long overdue. A brother who I have developed a great deal of admiration for, and so have you. His writing style is very unique and extraordinary, and he's very serious, but he's also very humorous. We'll talk a little bit about that with him today too, how he does it, why he even writes the way he writes. He is a self-described world-renowned white peopleologist, getter and doer of it, never reneged, never will, and the last real negus alive. And I guess I'm pronouncing that right. I mean, that's how it's
yes.
Pronunciation in the dictionary. And for those who don't know, a negus is a king, an emperor as in Ethiopia and Amharic. So he's the last of the great Ethiopian kings. And he joins us today on Make It Plain. Michael Harriot is here. Hey, brother, welcome. How are you, man?
I'm great. How are you?
Just fine, man. It's an honor to have you. And really, as I said, have a lot of admiration of a lot of the things you've been doing the past couple of years and a lot of the writing you've been sharing with us. First of all, family, loved ones, everybody safe and healthy in this pandemic?
Yes. Everybody is doing well. Everybody is locked up in the house, and I'm telling them not to go anywhere, so they're doing well.
Amen. All right, that's good. So let's start this way. You actually you had a one-on-one with the 44th president, brother, right?
Right. Yeah, I still consider him like the last president. But yeah, so it was like I want to say like I had the juice or I finagled an interview, but I just got an email that said, hey, you want to ask Barack Obama some questions? And I was like, yeah. And so I did. He was gracious enough to answer them. And, I think you can tell that he was, he has this cadence and this talking style that comes through even in the written form. So I was just happy to ask him some of the questions that, I've thought about, and I've always wondered why no one asked him. And I had the chance to do it. And
I admire, you even took it there in terms of asking him what he felt was his greatest accomplishment for the Black community, right? Right.
And that's something like, even in his answer, I kind of wanted him to go deeper because like I could have listed more things than he did, right? With, in this space where we're talking about student loan debt and, wage inequality. And I often point out in the list of things that he's done is he sued every major banking company in America. He sued the car financing industry because they were discriminating against Black borrowers and charging Black people higher interest rates. And that's just one of the many things that he's done. And I just wanted him to kind of, pat himself on the back. But he basically said, like, I help all Americans and I did some stuff that will help Black people. But, I was just happy to have him answer that question because it seems as if, you hear that a lot. Like, what did he do for us? And there are some measurable things that he did for us as president that people don't generally talk about or know about.
You also asked him, Michael, how being an African-American prepared him for being president, correct?
Right. I think, he brought up a list of names and people that he admired, from John Lewis to Fannie Lou Hamer. And, I think just being a Black person in America, it provided him, and he said it's like basically the resolve to kind of endure the scrutiny that a president goes through.
Yeah. And that's real. No, that's great, man. Congratulations on it. Have you had a chance to read the book yet?
I am starting on it. I started on it last night, but I hadn't gotten too far into it yet.
I was having a conversation with someone earlier, and I wonder how you feel about this. Barack Obama staked his claim as trying to be emulative of Abraham Lincoln. So he got the House, the Senate, and the White House, and still was polite, kind of threw Republicans a lifeline. Some people said Democrats at that time, as Democrats often are, were too magnanimous toward Republicans. In light of the Biden and Harris election, once they take office, and I guess I haven't checked the news lately, I guess they still going to take office. I know they're trying to stop them, but it changes every minute. Do you think the Obama approach to dealing with Republicans is going to work this time? I know Biden's been talking a lot of kumbaya, but do we just need to vanquish these jokers and this party and their whole lot? What do you think, Michael?
I think we do. I don't think Barack Obama could have done it, right? Like, so you can't have that kind of mentality as a Black person and become president, right? You can't be combative. You have to be not necessarily respectable. It's not respectability politics. It is the reality of living in, like, so like when you get stopped by a police officer, right? Like, you can't do the same thing that a white boy does, even if you have the same right. And the same is true in politics. Barack Obama can't do what Joe Biden did or is going to do, or has the potential to do, simply because he is a Black man. And, even as moderate as Barack Obama was, we saw what that Black backlash has brought us in President Trump. So imagine if he would have, gone whole hog and all in. Imagine what we would have gotten. I don't know what else we could have gotten besides Trump, but we know that Barack Obama couldn't do some of the things that a Joe Biden could have done or could do.
That's true. And it's funny you mentioned that, because if he had gone in Malcolm X, if Trump is the white lash to Obama, what would the white lash have been if Obama had come in on Malcolm X kind of energy? I don't know. It's amazing. But I think you're right. And one of the ways I think about it, Michael, it's the Jackie Robinson thing. The very first have to be Jackie and turn the other cheek all the time, because you're the first and you don't want to look like, so whether it's the first African-American or the first woman, the first Latino, it's kind of, but usually the second time around, you can do a little bit more.
We get to do what we want the second time around, but somebody's got to get inside the room or open that door for the next person.
Yeah, no question about it. You have also written recently about the Quawan Charles case, a tragic case. The images too graphic and frankly as disturbing, maybe not as severe, but as disturbing as Emmett Till. It invokes the image of Emmett Till when you see it. Have we learned anything more about that case in recent days?
So I talked to the attorneys yesterday for the family. They told me a couple of things, right? So apparently this white woman who was last seen with Quawan Charles, she's apparently left town. Their investigators confirmed that. The neighbors said, she had pictures with me of her packing up a U-Haul and gassing up, leaving town. So I don't know where law enforcement is with that information, but there are reliable reports that the woman who the family suspects may have at least known what happened between the last time they saw him and when he was found dead. She's the only human being that the officers and the investigators know he was with, right? So she's left town. The family has demanded a meeting with the Iberia Parish Sheriff's Department. They haven't had a response from the Sheriff's Department. And we also know that the family has lobbied the legislature to find out, to lower the standard of what's necessary to issue what they call an Amber Alert, right? To let the public know that a child is missing, because one of the strange things about this case is that the police knew he was missing for days before and never told the public or the news people about it, and never issued an Amber Alert. And so they're trying to lower that threshold and trying to get them to rename it to a Quawan Alert. So those are two things, because as they told me, that they can't bring him back, but at least they can affect change going forward.
What was the threshold for the Amber Alert that prevented anything from happening the way it should have in the first place?
Whatever the police decide. I mean, that's literally it. The police get to decide when they alert the public or the media about a missing child. And when this woman told the police the day her child was, hours after her child went missing, that he was missing from a locked room that was locked from the inside, they said he's probably gone to a football game. So they get to decide. And as you know, numerous people told me who I interviewed that if it was a white girl, they would have turned the state of Louisiana upside down. Yeah.
Folks, y'all can Google missing white woman syndrome, MWWS, and it's a thing. It is a real thing. It has its own Wikipedia page. So Michael is right about that. So do I have this right? He got in the car with someone. Is that the white woman in question, or what?
Yeah. So the white woman has a 17-year-old son that Quawan knew. The parents have never met this kid, but Quawan, who was reportedly a quiet child, all his friends and his family said he was pretty much quiet, had just moved from the town he was raised in to go live with his father. Uh-huh. And the last person who saw him was the only other child that he knew, a black kid in the town. And when the parents said, "Have you seen Quawan?" he was like, "Well, the last time I saw her, she was with this 17-year-old kid and his mother." And, one of the other things that we found out yesterday is that the Baldwin Louisiana Police Department reportedly has video of Quawan in the car with this woman. So, yeah, we don't know if he got in the car or, he was taken. No one really knows.
Yeah. And it's still a mystery, trying to get to the bottom of it. Michael, when Trayvon was killed, and we all went down to Sanford, I asked the question, whether or not it made any difference to elect a black president if we can't protect the lives of our own children. And as I look, the first black president has his new book coming out, and we celebrate that. And yet we're still dealing with trying to make our lives matter, trying to defend our children, trying to keep them from being killed, whether by police or whomever. Do you think that is a somewhat bipolar position for us to be in as black people, to celebrate Barack Obama, and for that matter, the first black woman in the White House now with Kamala, and yet we're still having Emmett Till-like situations in America?
So I think they're two separate things. I think the election of a black president was a symbolic step forward. It doesn't mean that America was less racist than it was on November 7th, 2008. So, yeah, I think Barack Obama's election was important. It has symbolic importance to black people. I was watching James Baldwin last night, and I remember when he said that, when Bobby Kennedy was elected as Attorney General, and someone said, in 40 years, we may even see an African-American elected president. And white people thought that was an incredible thing to say. And as James Baldwin said, if you would have gone to Harlem, black people were laughing at it, not because it was improbable, but because we know that black people always have been smart enough and talented enough to do it. Bobby Kennedy, like James Baldwin said, just got here yesterday. We've been here for 400 years. And so I think the specific strain of American racism will sometimes have a hole through which a Black person can escape and make it to the heights that a Barack Obama made it. But it doesn't mean that the lid isn't still on the ladder to success or the heights to which a Black person can reach in America. Those are two separate things. And it doesn't, like I always say, Barack Obama was a Harvard Law graduate. He went to Columbia. He was the smartest person at his high school. So it's not necessarily an incredible thing to me to see someone who is smart and talented and charismatic become the president of the United States, right? But what followed him, which shows you the dichotomy of racism in America, is that it's just a regular old mediocre white man with no experience, not particularly smart, followed the smartest president of our lifetimes,
Yeah, definitely mediocre. I mean, he's white trash.
Right. Mediocre is giving him credit for a lot, but
and normally we think of white trash as poor, but I mean, we know he ain't got no money. As far as I'm concerned, you have $500 million in debt. You broke too, but he's just upper class. And you're right. And I think that's part of the resentment. A Black, intelligent, articulate family. And that makes people in Trump world angry because we're not supposed to be that articulate and that intelligent and that successful. And he and his family clearly are not. We also are seeing this attitude that Trump has wrought in hate crimes going up. You've written about that as well. We got a new report from the FBI, don't we?
Right. The 2019 report. So what happened in 2019 has just been released, and it shows that the racist murders doubled between 2018 and 2019. So 2018 had the highest recorded amount of racism-related murders on record, which was 24. And in 2019, it was 51. So, there was a huge jump. And that's since 1990, we've never seen that amount of racism or hate crime-related murders. And, we see this anecdotally in society where we see these kinds of issues raised up. And it's interesting that the rise in hate crimes didn't jump that much overall. It is just that it went from white people threatening people to white people actually doing stuff, right? So it went from them talking junk to people to actual simple assault and aggravated assault and murder. So it's not like we got an influx of racism. It's that they were emboldened by something. And I could only guess that it was Trump to actually take one step forward and do the things that were on their minds.
Yeah. And to literally act on it. And a word to the wise. I know some looked at Million MAGA and all this other bluster and wolf tickets they were talking since the election and saying, they're not really going to do nothing. But Michael's right. They do things. They may not do things in the middle of Chocolate City out loud at a Million MAGA march, but they do a lot of other little things. And you all should read Michael's piece in the report. So, man, tell us a bit more about you and how you became a writer and how you developed your extraordinary writing style, brother.
Well, so I grew up in Hartsville, South Carolina, a little town called Hartsville, South Carolina. And I'm currently writing a book about it. So I interviewed my mother about the book. I was never one who thought that I would ever write a memoir. It was just kind of self-indulgent to me. But I'm telling the story about race in America, and I'm telling it through the lens of my childhood because I eventually found out that it was interesting because I was homeschooled in an all-Black neighborhood for most of my life. until I was 13 years old, right? And so I asked my mother why she did that, homeschooled my sisters and I. And she told me that, and this is a quote that I'll never forget, that she didn't think a Black child could realize his humanity in the presence of whiteness, right? So she surrounded us with just Blackness. Like, it wasn't, like, I don't remember it being, like, Blackness being a thing that I focused on. It was just like everything around me happened to be Black. It wasn't until I was older that I realized, oh, well, most of the people in the world aren't Black, because I was just surrounded by Black people. And so, one, I think it taught me to not just think critically, but the education that she provided was outside of the education curriculum of the American school system. So I never learned to just automatically absorb the things that people told me just because they told me to learn that, right? So, it was a combination of critical thinking and pattern recognition and, for all accounts, being a skeptic. Like, I'm a skeptic. When you tell me something, I got to find out if that is true for myself. And so I use that to talk about the lens of whiteness, because I never learned, people think I am antagonistic with white people. It is just that I think most people have this subconscious deference to whiteness that we all absorb and learn through osmosis and just living in America, right? And I never learned it. So I talk to white people like I talk to Black people. Like, I don't feel the need to, overly enunciate my R's or speak specifically in their tone. So I think a lot of times it comes off as aggressive, right? Like, even when I say white people, like, a lot of people take issue with that. And I was like, but you white. And so I write about it through that lens. And one of the things that it taught me, just reading a lot, like, my mom made me into all of my sisters and I into an avid reader, my entire family into avid readers. And I think that it, influences my writing. I was always a fan of stand-up comedy. To me, it is the purest art form, and poetry. So I think that influences my writing. And so I use humor a lot to disarm people and to explain points in a way that makes people relate and absorb them more than just pointing out statistics, because a lot of people are surprised to find out that my background is in macroeconomics. I have a master's in macroeconomics. So I was always an avid reader, but my training is in economics and in identifying patterns from numbers.
Wow. I flunked economics in school, brother. Not my thing. I took that zero big time. So you were gifted, brother, and clearly quite cerebral. And I was going to ask you too about the humor, because the humor is great. Who are some of the humorists that have influenced you in your writing? I'm just curious.
From a kid, I was a big Mark Twain fan. Paul Beatty. I think it's not just humor, but cultural criticism. I've always like Richard Pryor was, I think Richard Pryor could be argued as the greatest American artist, simply because every iteration of stand-up comedy that we see now is kind of a evolution of what he did, right? From taking reality and making it into social commentary that you just happen to laugh at. So Richard Pryor, Paul Beatty, and people like that. Even white writers. I'm a big fan of Doug Stanhope, the comedian. And so I study comedy to, first of all, it's about a precision of words. The best comedians have an economy of words that make things funny and know how to create analogies. So I think it is a good form for a writer to study, to learn how to use words and analogy and social perception to create a point.
Amen. No, that's great. And I like what you were saying about your mom. It's funny. I was in a conversation with someone recently, and this comes up, as you know, from time to time, um, whether what we had in segregation in terms of our own structures and schools, and even some semblance of our own educational environment outside of white indoctrinated education, whether that was better. I forget, a younger person was asking me about that, and we kind of talked through it. And what your mom said, I think some would consider an argument for what we lacked in the immediate aftermath of desegregation, and what we still lack today. And I was saying to this young person that segregation was not sustainable, yet somehow I don't think the movement to desegregate meant that we needed to shut down our own indigenous and inherent institutions. And what your mom was giving you at home is what a lot of folk got in the segregated schools. So like, my grandparents and whatnot, they were on a whole nother level of awareness and blackness and black intellectualism that, unlike you, I wasn't homeschooled, but I had to get that in an extracurricular format as opposed to in school. So your mom, right?
Yeah, that's the thing that, again, from not going to public schools, I am often surprised about the things that I don't know, right? Like, for instance, it was only recently that I realized, most people get most of their education in schools. Like, I didn't realize, I guess just growing up the way that I did, that, like the school, even when I went to school, it was like a supplemental education. It wasn't like the people at school didn't teach me. That was a thing that I got. My education was a thing that I got from home. And the stuff that you learned in school was, this is the stuff that white people are going to need you to know. And this is the stuff but like I didn't learn how to multiply and divide and add and subtract at school, right? I didn't learn how to read at school. I didn't learn most of the books that I've ever read in my life were not read because of school. So my education, even in a school setting, was still mostly at home, right? I always thought like I really didn't learn anything in a classroom until probably I was like midway through college or in graduate school, because that's the stuff that, to me, in my perception, I've always thought that they taught you, in case you missed this at home, you should know this. And you should know about this stuff, but it's not like it's not meant to replace an education. And I say that to say, like, when integration happened, it wasn't meant for us to move into white spaces or to value white spaces more, right? Like the doctors that HBCUs produced were coming from Black schools that were just as good as those white schools, right? Yeah. Like when you think about, I heard Dr. Greg Carr say this past week that when you think about the Little Rock Nine, all those students and the students that desegregated these white schools, the white schools went and handpicked the best students, right? So those students were being educated at Black schools, and they were so smart that they broke the whole education segregation system in America. Like, that's how incredibly smart and intelligent that they were. And they were being taught that at Black schools, who were producing a bunch of that stuff, right? Like, there were like 8 people who did what Rosa Parks did before Rosa Parks even did it, right? So when we think about, there was this one crazy, it was a bunch of people. And then you finally noticed when the last person did it, right? But there was a bunch of us thinking that we broke it, and it was the collective we, right? And it's only in the loss of that community that we made white things more valuable. We made Harvard more valuable than Tuskegee. When like who from Tuskegee, from Harvard, that could hold a candle to George Washington Carver?
That's
Booker
right.
T. Washington, or or many of the other black people who went to HBCUs. They produce most of the black PhDs. The person who's trying to figure out the coronavirus is a black woman, right? So these schools didn't give us anything, and these white spaces didn't give us anything that we hadn't already created. What we, the reason for desegregation is that we knew that it couldn't be separate and equal, because we knew that white people was never going to make the black things equivalent to what they had. So we had to, to equalize it by making them share their spaces with us. But it wasn't never a thing like the white stuff was better. That's one of the things that I was arguing with Pete Buttigieg about when he was running for president. Like, no, you don't say we need more role models in black neighborhoods. We need to show them the way. Bruh, that is not true. Like, don't even start that argument, because it's dangerous to perpetuate it, when the reality is, if you gave us the stuff you have, we'll be out. You ain't got to teach us how to value education. You ain't got to give us no role models. You ain't got to have nobody to show us the way. Give us some of the stuff that you have, and we'll be fine.
And we'll be fine. No, you're absolutely right. That's why it's not to belabor the point, but it's gratifying, isn't it, to see some of the top athletes now going back to HBCUs. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
And that's because I've always felt too, the competition would be over if HBCUs had the same television contracts and coverage that the white schools when it comes to athletics, because these white schools make that money off the athletic programs. If we had the same opportunity and could be seen on people's televisions and apps like the white schools are, it'd be a whole different ball game. No pun intended. And I'm glad some of these young black people are deciding to go back to HBCUs, because to the point I was making earlier, I think it's this generation more than ever, these up and coming Gen Zers who would benefit greatly by going back to the roots, so to speak, when it comes to getting that education, so that we are clear and they are clear, better yet, about what it's really all about, and get the foundation that your mother gave you and that others of us got at HBCUs. So no, that's important. Lastly, brother, when did you find out that you are an Ethiopian king and the last one remaining?
Well, I love the word niggas, because first of all, let's be correct. Like, niggas is non-gender specific, right? So it's a king or queen, both are niggas, and I've always advocated for the use of the word because it describes us more aptly than any other word to me. Like, I am a niggas. I am the royalty from Africa that you try to make into something despicable like the N-word, right? Mm-hmm. So
love it. So
I'm the last real niggas alive, and you are too, and everybody else is too.
Amen. I like that. If you don't mind, I'm gonna volunteer to help you spread that and change this wording that we use around. I love that. That's wonderful. Folks, no stranger to anyone. This brother's very popular. Read his latest pieces that we've discussed today, and he's putting stuff out pretty regularly. A dynamic brother. He makes us all think and smile as well, and it's very, very critical, especially in these times. So while this plague is picking back up and you're home during the holidays, stay home and catch up on your Michael Harriot at theroot.com. Michael, thank you, my brother.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, subscribe, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.